Hey, welcome. It's Ruth Wilcox here, live online. TGIF, everybody. And good afternoon to those of you that are Mountain Time or beyond, and good late morning to those of you that are on the West Coast. If you can hear the sound of my voice, can you please give an indication that you can so I know we're up and running? Super duper. All right. We are going to be talking today all about social psychology. We are going to cram the entire semester's worth of information from undergrad social psych into less than 3 hours. Social psych is kind of the bridge in between the study of sociology and psychology. If you recall, sociology is the study of groups. Psychology is the study of individual behavior. Social psychology then is the study of how the presence of others influences individual behavior. So we're going to be starting our time together today talking about identity formation, how other folks influence that. We'll be taking a break, coming back, doing an ICC passage together, and then getting into discussion of attribution theory and bias. So lots of stuff to do today. Before we jump too far in, just want to check in with you guys about how homework is going and how many of you guys have done any of the full-length practice tests. Anybody? All right. We got some folks doing their stuff. Very good. How's that going for you? Looks like pretty good. Superb. Okay, have you gotten diagnostic exam 1A completed? If not, be sure you do that. Because after class today, in between this class and our next class, you're going to need to take diagnostic 1B. And again, I will send out email reminder with that information and the other homework hints for you to do in between today's class and what we're going to do next week. All right. Anyone have any questions from what you're seeing on these 6 questions that are up on the screen? We've talked about everything here. Anything problematic, confusing? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so we are just going to move on and jump right into our information today. So if I were to ask you to describe yourself, what would you say? What kind of words would you use to describe yourself? Use the chat box. Sleepy. Yeah, it's Friday, right? What else? Female? I would too. What else? Okay, Hispanic? Your age 21? I would say a different number. That you're an athlete. I would definitely not say that about myself. I'm doing good to walk and chew gum at the same time. Any other descriptors that you would use? Nearsighted? Yeah, me too. Student. Okay. All right. Well, that's a good list to get us started into what we need to talk about today. So, how do those descriptors that we just used fit together with those statuses that we talked about last time, right? Master status, achieved status, and ascribed status. Do we have any master status descriptors in that list? A lot of them are ascribed, right? Such as female, your age, okay. Any of them are they any of them achieved? Athlete, where do you think student would go? It could be achieved. Absolutely, if you put the word college in front of it, because you have to have done something to be able to gain entry into college, right? Okay. Gives you just kind of an idea of how this works together. Great. Let's see if I can move this. There we go. So how does your description of yourself change in different contexts? Like, how would you describe yourself at a party? What, if you're getting a break from studying and you're hanging out with some friends, partying, meeting new people, what might you say about yourself in that context? You tell somebody that you fence, you're a fencer. What else? Kind of cool, actually, Felix. You might tell people that you're an extrovert. What else? You like to rock wall climb? Okay. Now, you're at your med school interview. How would you describe yourself there? You'd say you're determined, that you're compassionate. Empathic. You talk about your medical experience. Okay, so the point would be you would describe yourself differently in a relaxed social setting than you would at an interview, whether it's a job interview or a med school interview. We describe ourselves differently depending on the situation and the circumstance. Okay, well, that part of that is related to something we call impression management. It's, we try to manage our image by influencing how others see us, how they perceive us. And there is a particular way of talking about this, a theory base called the dramaturgical perspective, which is related to SI, that it's about role playing. It says it's about role playing. And how we present ourselves depends on the role that we are playing at any given point in time. And so we base how we present on the values, norms, and expectations of the culture. And the end goal being we want people to like us. We want people to accept us and present ourselves in a way that's acceptable to others. So this way of looking at things says, I don't know if anybody has any theater experience, but when you're not on stage, when you're backstage, you're out of character and you're just yourself. But when you are front and center on stage, then you are projecting this image or playing this role and presenting yourself in the way you think people will best identify with you, or with this character, this role that you are filling. So, first freestanding question of the day. Get our polling option open here. Which of the following would best represent the difference between front and backstage self? Please go ahead and enter your response. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and publish these poll results. Looks like everybody's pretty much in agreement that C is the answer, and you would be oh so correct. Yeah, this is the only one that offers both a front and a back stage. All right, so this thing we call self-concept, aka self-identity, self-construction, self-perspective. It's everything you believe about who you are as a distinct, unique person. And this is made up of things that we call both personal identity and social identity. Okay, so social identity is going to be those aspects of yourself that how the society and culture would identify you. So if you think back to our list, what are a couple of things that would be social identity descriptors? Right, that list of descriptive words that we generated at the beginning when, the question was, how would you identify yourself? Can you think of a couple of things that are social identity descriptors? Extrovert could also be how you personally identify yourself. Yeah, some of the terms we used were student and athlete. Right. Personal identity, another one, oops, sorry. Didn't mean to switch yet. Another that could go either place would be like female, because society and culture IDs you as that. But you also would personally identify yourself as that. So, right, the descriptor of sleepy. Well, today, that's how you describe yourself. It's part of your personal identity today, right? The point would be both of these things come together to form this thing we call self-concept or self-identity. There are a lot of things related to social identity that are kind of important, and they involve actually a lot of demographic categories that is good to know and understand as a potential physician, because these can greatly impact how people not only view themselves, but then interact with you as a physician, how you can connect or disconnect with them as a patient. These are indicated in this column of cultural characteristics. There is a little acronym here, ADDRESSING, addressing. This is something that Pamela Hayes, a social psychologist, came up with. You don't need to know that name. I just like to give out names, give credit where credit's due. All important social identifiers. Who we are by age, disability status, religion, ethnicity and race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, indigenous background status, national origin, and gender, all really important for people to identify who they are and how they then interact with the world and you as a potential physician. Okay. When we get over to talking about cognition and cognitive development, we will talk more about schemas. Schemas basically are concepts, ideas that we construct, ways that we understand and organize the environment. So self-schemas are these beliefs and ideas that we have about ourselves that then guide and organize how we process information that's important to us. So, our self-concept is made up of a bunch of self-schemas, whether you think you're tall or short, whether you're funny or serious, whether you're nervous and tend to be a little on the more anxious side, or you think you're more laid back, where you come from, what's kind of going on for you in the moment, and what's going to happen in the future, what you think about yourself in the future. The concept of self-efficacy. This is how good you think you are at something. This is an Albert Bandura idea. When you have high self-efficacy, that means you think you're really good at doing something. When you have low self-efficacy, that means not so much. And self-efficacy can vary from task to task. So for instance, I think I have pretty high self-efficacy when it comes to teaching, facilitating learning, that kind of thing. I am in the not so much category when it comes to my athletic ability. Locus of control has to do with whether you think you have control over what's happening to you and what's going on. Internal locus means you believe you do have control, that the center of control is within you. External locus means you got no control over nothing. It's all out in the environment, and you're kind of at the mercy of whatever. These two things interact in a concept known as learned helplessness. So let's do this freestanding question to see and understand what you already know about that relationship. Okay, I'm getting ready to publish our results. All right. Does anybody recognize what kind of question this is? What strategy we will use? Yeah, this is a 2x2. Right? So learned helplessness. Is that about high self-efficacy or low self-efficacy? Yep, low. So we can get rid of the answer choices that say high. And then is it about an internal locus or external locus? about the external locus. So once again, learned helplessness, low self-efficacy, external locus of control. It's the definition. And how we came to know about this is through a set of experiments that was conducted by Martin Seligman. He set up a series of experiments with these poor dogs, and that is a dog. You know, I don't know if you would agree. To me, it looks kind of like a rabbit dog hybrid thing trying to get over the hurdle. But so these animals were in cages with a floor that had a low level of shock going through it. And one group, one control group, the dogs were harnessed and there was no shock. In another control group, the dogs were harnessed and they could press a lever to get away from the shock. And in the experimental group, the dogs were harnessed but had to endure shocks for an arbitrary amount of time. So just a little quick review. What's the independent variable here? What is the thing that's being the experimenter is manipulating? Well, there's a couple of things actually. Yeah, whether or not there was a shock, that was manipulated. What was the other thing that was manipulated? Yeah, whether the dog was harnessed or not. And then what was it? What would be the dependent variable? What was being measured? Yeah, the dog's behavior, the dog's reaction. Whether or not they tried to get away. And what he found was that those animals that could not get away from the shock but had the opportunity to do so, after a while they quit trying to get away from the shock. Okay. Aversive control. This is when behavior is motivated either by the reality or the potential threat that something unpleasant is going to happen. And we do one of two things depending on where we are in this process. We utilize escape behavior when this unpredicted, unpleasant thing has already happened. We run away. Bad, nasty happens, we run away. What would be an example of that? Okay, we evacuate from a fire, right? Fire alarm goes off, right? Great. And the other thing we do is called avoidance behavior. We do this to avoid. It hasn't happened yet. Before something happens, but we're anticipating something unpleasant, yucky is going to happen. So we do something to avoid it. What would be an example of that? Okay. Getting your flu shot. Going back to the tornado flood, how about if we evacuate before the tornado or the flood happens? You know, we evacuate before a hurricane. Or we call in sick to work on a day when we know unpleasant stuff is going to be happening. Or you don't show up for an exam that you know you haven't studied for yet and want to take the makeup for if one is available, right? All of those. All right. So we've got another freestanding question to help us parse out the difference between external locus of control, high self-efficacy, low control, learned helplessness, and low self-efficacy with an internal locus of control. What's going on in this scenario? This is always an interesting one. I am about to go ahead and publish our results. And we're kind of all over the place on this one. So let's take it point by point. Let's start with A. Okay, so there's this patient who is morbidly obese. You've been encouraging this person to lose weight for 3 years, but they have not done so. And in a recent checkup, the person says, well, mom and dad were both overweight, died young. I'm just destined to do the same thing. It's in my genes. So is that an example of internal or external locus of control? Yeah, that's external. So we can go ahead then and eliminate D from our possibilities because there's internal listed there. And would you say this person has high self-efficacy or low self-efficacy? Low. So we can get rid of B. So now we're between simply external locus of control and learned helplessness. Well, here's the thing. There's another thing with learned helplessness. Our answer here is A. Because with learned helplessness, there is implied that the person has tried and failed, that there is some kind of experience that has led that person to just give up. So from the question stem, has S ever tried to lose weight in the 3 years? Yeah, no. So it can't be learned helplessness. Kind of tricky, huh? Okay. So we've got self-schemas, self-esteem, self-efficacy, locus of control. And we're going to have a series of statements that will match up with these. So again, using the polling option, statement 1. Is that a self-schema? Is that about self-esteem, self-efficacy, or locus of control? Okay, publishing results. Statement 1 is about self-esteem. It's about how RJ feels about himself. He feels good. Let's try statement 2. Okay. Publishing these results. And letting you know that our answer here, that's a self-schema. He believes he is intelligent. It would have been better had the statement read, RJ believes that he is intelligent. That would have been helpful to you. But, okay, it's a belief about himself. All right, statement 3. publishing these results, and most are in agreement, and correctly so. That's a self-efficacy thing, right? Believes he's not good. He has low self-efficacy then when it comes to phlebotomy, which then of course means statement 4 has to be D, right? He believes he got a good MCAT score because his friend helped him study. So obviously locus of control, but would that be an internal locus of control belief or an external locus? Yep, absolutely. External. Nice job. Okay, so let's take a look at a few things. This question is going to get us into some other areas and aspects of identity. What do you suppose some factors may have been that led old RJ to want to be a doctor? Probably some of the same things that have led some of you guys to want to be a doctor. What do you suppose some of those things are? They've had some kind of experience in healthcare, right? What else? Maybe curiosity? Intellectual interest? A desire to help others? Anything else you can think of? The profession is respected, right? Okay. Whole variety of reasons. Well, social learning theory, all of what we've just talked about looks at occurs in some social context. So social learning theory says that all learning takes place socially and can happen just through observation. So, right, experience with healthcare. RJ's been to the doctor, kind of knows from that what's involved and finds it to be interesting, and sees that people are being helped and he would like to do that, and sees that doctors carry a certain amount of social respect. All of that has occurred to him because of his observation and personal experience with people in the healthcare field. So we often use reference groups. What are yours right now? What are some of your reference groups? Doctors, yeah. Yeah, other pre-med students. And med students, right? Well, we have a theory base called social comparison theory that says we use reference groups. We compare ourselves to others in order to get an accurate self-assessment. And so how we identify ourselves is informed and shaped by the comparisons we make and the type of reference groups that we have and that we use. Okay, do you see any similarities between social comparison theory and social learning theory? Right. Okay, yeah, we've got with both, there's a social context observation going on, right? What are differences between social learning and social comparison? Right. Yeah, social learning is about observing kind of generally, whereas social comparison involves a specific group. Good. All right. Utilizing others to help inform us about ourselves also involves the ability for us to understand another person's point of view. The ability to do this is called role taking. Right? Also known as social perspective taking. And this is an ability that evolves for us as we grow and develop. Selman did a lot of work on this, developed a whole theory about it, took a look at what's going on from birth until adulthood and how this ability develops. So very early on, pre-infancy and preschool, basically we can't do this. And we will see this when we talk about Piaget as well. Little ones can only understand the world from their point of view. And then when we get into early elementary school, we understand that people see things differently, but we can't really process all the nuances and complexities of that. We just get it that different people think differently. As we get a little older in elementary school, we again understand folks have different points of view, but we still are not able to process both ours and someone else's at the same time. We start to kind of do that as preteens. But the true ability to do that does not come out until early adolescence, and that has everything in the world to do with what's going on with the development of our frontal lobes. Areas of our frontal lobes that are involved, the prefrontal cortex that are involved in processing this kind of information, are starting to better develop and mature. And that allows us then to start this social perspective taking. All right. The issue of morals in our identity is the degree to which this is important to us in who we consider ourselves to be. And Lawrence Kohlberg did studies in this area that have, frankly, since been challenged by others, because he only studied white guys at Harvard to develop his theory. But he says there's basically three levels. The first is what's going on with children. And basically, kiddos obey morals either because they don't want to get in trouble, or they're going to get something out of doing so. And some people, frankly, never progress beyond this stage. Where he says most folks get to by adolescence and into adulthood is the conventional stage, where we obey rules, morals of society in order to have social approval and to keep the social order intact. And he says a small percentage, like about 15% of adults, move on to his final post-conventional stage, where people are obeying or challenging rules and regulations based on more of a sense of social justice, personal ethical beliefs, and how those morals, laws either empower people or infringe on their rights. Okay, more about presence of others. How does the presence of others affect our behavior? If we look at what's going on in this graphic, what does this graphic suggest? About what happens when people are all together in groups. Yeah, we tend to do what we kind of go with the herd, right? But not always, right? Because we do have some folks that are not conforming. Most folks conform, but we do have some that don't. Yeah. So we're going to be looking at some things about that right now. How the presence of others influences our behavior. So here we've got an example scenario. We've got a surgical resident that's very good at a peg transfer task. What do you think is going to happen to this person's performance if they're watched by third-year medical students? Gonna do well. Yeah. Not only is she gonna do well, she's gonna do bigger, better, faster. Okay. On the other hand, if we've got a surgeon who's leading a team of 12 and this is his very first laparoscopic surgery ever, how do you think he's going to perform? Not so great. Yeah, when we got a tip off the kind of sarcastic question afterwards, where are we going to send, what funeral home gets the flowers? Okay. This is what's known as social facilitation, the social facilitation effect, right? Social facilitation says that when we are performing something that we know well, that is simple, that we've rehearsed a lot, that the presence of others improves our performance, but we get worse in the presence of others on new, complicated, not well-rehearsed tasks. So either way, that has to do with social facilitation. Now, what happens to individual identity when we become part of a big group, when we are in a very large crowd? We lose our we blend in, lose our individuality. Right. Becomes harder to stand out. This is what's known as de-individuation, the de-individuation effect. Okay. Where there is a situation, there's a high degree of arousal, low degree of personal responsibility, we lose our sense of restraint. This is what mob mentality is about. When people can't identify us, we're in a big group, we can't be easily identified, highly emotional or physiologically arousing situation, we go with the herd, and people tend to lose their sense of what's right, wrong, lose their ability to abide by normal behavioral constraint. All right. Another way other people influence us is what's going on with helping behavior. So are we more likely to help someone if you're alone, or are you more likely to help if there's a bunch of people? What do you think? When you're alone, yep. This is what's known as the bystander effect. We are less likely to help when there are other people around. There's more than 2 other people besides us. We become less likely to help. And this is due to something called the diffusion of responsibility, right? The diffusion of responsibility, responsibility is inversely related to the number of people present. So the more people present, the less likely we are to feel individually responsible for stepping up and helping. This phenomenon was first written up became a social psych principle as the result of some researchers taking interest in the case of Kitty Genovese. Happened in the middle 60s. She was attacked, stabbed to death right outside her own apartment complex. It was guesstimated that at least 50-something people heard the attack, heard her screaming. The first report on this story was nobody called police. Nobody did anything. That's not quite true. Some people did, but not nearly as many people as one would hope would have done that. Okay. How many folks, let's see a show of hands, how many folks have had to do group projects in school? Dadgum near everybody, right? Yeah. How did you feel about that? What are your thoughts about group projects? What usually happens when you do a group project? Yeah, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Yeah. Yeah, typically what happens, and usually it's because the prof doesn't hold everybody accountable, is that only a select few do most of the work. This is a phenomenon referred to as social loafing. Everybody is less likely to exert the same individual effort that they would have if they were working independently. So it's the old, rope pull thing. What we expect is that everybody's going to have the same level of effort. So, the more the merrier. But what actually happens is that the more people join the group, the less individual effort any one person exerts. Unless we've got some kind of accountability factor built in. Okay, peer pressure. Everybody's familiar with peer pressure. It's when folks feel directly or indirectly pressured to change their behavior to match those of the people around them. Typically, peer groups are those social groups where people are close in age and share interests. And typically this is going on where peer pressure seems to influence behavior most is in later childhood and adolescence. We typically think of peer pressure as being bad. Like, peers are making other people, do bad things. But sometimes peer pressure can actually be good. There are positive examples of peer pressure. Can you think of any? Yeah, helps to give you motivation to work or study groups. Makes everybody help, gives everybody a more positive focus. Team sports, right? Again, everybody's working together to a more positive goal, right? Yeah, anything having to do with accountability. right? So where we think about peer pressure and the negative, kids get into, smoking and drinking and doing drugs because of peer pressure. Well, peer pressure can actually flip that the other way. If the norms and values of the peer group is to not do that stuff, then they will exert pressure on folks in the group to not do that stuff. So there you go. So what do you think? Do groups or individuals make better decisions? Yeah, absolutely. Depends on the group, depends on the people, depends on the situation. Yeah. We're talking here specifically about a phenomenon known as groupthink. This is when groups do not make good decisions because the group cares more about harmony and reaching consensus and sacrifices critical thinking, evaluation, considering alternatives. And it leads to really dysfunctional decision making. And this thing is most likely to happen when the group is overly optimistic, right? It's that team who's so sure they're going to win that they don't adequately prepare, right? They're so sure that their stance is right, they don't even consider any other viewpoints. The group also is so cohesive, it's so connected. The in-group pull is so strong that anybody outside the group is made out to be the devil, right? They're little demons. And any dissenting opinions within the group are quickly squashed. The group itself prevents alternative opinions, beliefs, information from being even presented. And the individuals within the group feel the pressure to keep their own thoughts and opinions to themselves. Okay, here's a little scenario for you. We've got people who agree on a subject. They get put in a room together so they can discuss the situation further. What do you suppose happens to their views? Right, views get stronger, they're reinforced. This is the phenomenon known as group polarization. Okay, it's when pre-existing views of members intensify or move more strongly toward one pole of a polar or a dichotomy. So for instance, if we've got a group of folks that are getting together before a meeting and they have a particular view that this one possible medical procedure is not really, we're just not sold on it. We don't think it's just horrible, but no, I'm not so up on it. After the meeting, everybody's convinced it's the worst idea in the world, right? Okay, group polarization is not about splitting the group. It's about moving the group further along the line of thinking that they already had. Okay, we've got a great comeback slide here. This is your go-to on all of these terms, what they are. Great way to make your flashcards come back to this slide. Everything we've just talked about the influence of other people, how other people influence our behavior, is right here. What the different phenomenon are, what's going on, and what the effect of the behavior is. Everything we just talked about. Okay, so you can come back and pick out this slide. Now we're going to have some freestanding questions to check you out on what we've just talked about. So if you would, go ahead and use the polling option. Alrighty, I'm going to close out the poll and publish our results. Looks like the majority of folks are thinking that the answer to this question is social loafing. So we've got a large hospital where the head nurse sees that routine work within the ER takes 3 hours. Doesn't matter how many nurses are present or the number of emergencies. Always takes 3 hours. This then is an example of social loafing. It's about individual effort, right? Let's try the next one. All right, going to go ahead and close the poll and publish the results. And this is always an interesting one too. How you guys have split on your answers is how every group I've ever had splits on this particular question. So our answer is D. What is it in the question stem that helps differentiate group polarization and groupthink? Right. This phrase, research into the treatment is terminated without further consideration. That's what separates out group polarization from groupthink. It's the hallmark of groupthink. We don't think anymore. Okay. Another. Okay, another interesting one. I'm going to go ahead and close out and show our results. Let's take a look at this. What kind of question is this? What's our strategy? No, yep, it's an accept. We see we've got the word accept in big bold letters. So this is an ENL, except not least. So that means 3 of these are examples or are related to social facilitation. There's only 1 that's not. So let's see, a track athlete notices her time improves at competition. Would that fit social facilitation? Yes. A student giving her first speech stumbles over her words and forgets many key points that she was able to do during rehearsal. Does that fit social facilitation? Yep, it does. Factory workers in an assembly line perform a repetitive task much more quickly when working together than when they're alone. Does that fit social facilitation? Yepers. Extrovert feels more energy in the presence of others and stays to study longer at the library than when she is alone. Does that fit social facilitation? Nope. That's all about being an extrovert. So our answer is indeed D. Okay. Conformity. All right. This is all about when we adjust our behavior or thinking based on what others are doing and what we think they think of us. Okay, obedience is when we comply with explicit instructions or orders from an authority figure. These two go hand in hand. Obedience is a form of conformity. It's about changing our behavior. What makes obedience obedience is we're being asked to do something based on someone we believe to be an authority or in an authority position. Okay? All right, folks. We get to take a break. Yay. I am seeing it's about 21 after, going on 22 after. So 10 minutes, that would be 32 after the hour. We will come back together then. So I'll see you in 10. And we are back. If you can hear the sound of my voice, please give me an indication that you can. So I know we're up and running and on the same page. Thanks, you guys. Okie doke. Well, we're going to start off our second half with an ICC passage. We can see that this passage has 6 questions to it, which means we're going to have about 9.5 minutes for you guys to map the passage. We'll take a couple of minutes for that, and then for you to answer those 6 questions. So you can go ahead and begin your passage mapping now. Okay. We can start our first question now. Next question. Next question. Next question. And next question. And last question. Okay, let's take a look at this together. How was that for you guys? What did you think of that? ICC. Fairly easy. Yeah, this is one of the easier ones, right? There's not any figures that you have to figure out. The verbiage is fairly straightforward. The size of the font on the page also helps. So you can read through it and kind of figure out what's going on, map it fairly easily. And then the questions following are also pretty straightforward. So looking at this together and mapping it out together. So, okay, we've got self-concept influenced by culture. We've got individualism and collectivist. So when we come over to our note board, and again, just a reminder, I am using my typing rather than writing because my notepad doesn't work properly. So we've got self concept and collectivist, individualist culture. That's what we're going to be talking about. So we've got a study about self-concept and task performance. So we've got people completing a questionnaire, and they selected high, very high individuals, and high, very high collectivists to go to the second part. So paragraph 2, we've got a questionnaire to select participants. High, very high. Then we've got all solved a simple puzzle on their own. Then divided into small groups of 4 to discuss benefits and drawbacks of teamwork. Then small groups work together to solve puzzle 2. Then each member solved puzzle 3 while watched. And then everybody redid the same questionnaire. So in paragraph 3, we've got study methods. And then here we go. We got statistical analysis, 2 findings. Participants solved 3 faster than 1. And everybody scored higher on their second questionnaire. So then, here we go. Paragraph 4, we have results. All right. Question 1. Do we need the passage to answer this question? No. So that makes it a memory question. And what's our strategy? Process of elimination, absolutely. So we just go right ahead and do it. So we got a group of collectivist immigrants moving to the United States over the years. They gave up their collectivist ways, adopted more individualist lifestyles. What has happened? Is that assimilation? Yep. We don't really even have to go through the rest, right? That is the definition of assimilation. Okay. Which of the following demonstrates stigmatization based on social identity? What kind of question is this? Do we need the passage? Is this okay? Explicit asks you to figure out something directly from the passage. Does this have anything to do with the passage? Yeah, no, it's a memory question. It's just knowing what stigmatization is based on social identity. So what's our strategy? Again, process of elimination. So we just go ahead and do it. So is a high school quarterback being revered by his classmates? Is that stigmatization? No. Is a temporary employee losing job because he's frequently late to work? Is that stigmatization? Nope. How about a transgender youth being barred from participating because league officials do not recognize her gender? Yeah. And how about an African American student losing her scholarship for violating rules? Is that stigma? No, that's just like what happens, right? That's consequences for breaking the rules. So our answer is C. Okay. Do we need the passage to answer this question? Yeah, no, this is another memory question. We need to know what these 4 answer choices are about. And our strategy again is, yeah, process of elimination. So we go ahead and do it. So if we're saying it's hard to concentrate with everybody in my group staring at me, it's their fault I did so poorly on that puzzle. Is that the fundamental attribution error? No. Is that the optimism bias? No. Is that the self-serving bias? Oh yeah, it is. Is it the self-reference bias? No. And we don't know, we haven't gotten to these biases yet. We will in just a bit. Okay. Number 4. Do we need the passage for this? Nope. What's our strategy? Process of elimination. We're going to go ahead and do it. Okay, so we got a researcher wanting to localize precise regions of changing activity. So which imaging technique is going to do that? Will CAT scan give you precise regions of change. Changing activity. Will a CAT scan tell you anything about activity? Nope. Will a PET scan tell you anything about activity? Yep. Will an MRI tell you anything about activity? Regular MRI will not tell you anything about activity. It tells you about structure, not about function. How about an EEG? Will that tell you anything about activity? Yes, but will it give you precise regions of the brain? Right. So our answer here is B. Okay. What kind of question is this? Yeah, this is an implicit. It's asking us to figure something out, right? It's asking us which of these scenarios demonstrate social loafing. So what's our strategy? Yeah, process of elimination. So we're going to go ahead and do it. Okay, so does this demonstrate social loafing? Average time it took participants to solve the puzzles. First puzzle, 9 minutes, 11:48 for puzzle 2, and 6:57 for puzzle 3. Does that demonstrate social loafing? Okay, let's see. Puzzle 1, who did puzzle 1? Individuals. Who did puzzle 2? The group. Who did puzzle 3? Okay, so when it takes the group longer to do the puzzles than it took the individuals, does that indicate social loafing? Yeah. Okay, when the researcher first entered the room, she tripped and fell. All the participants were in the room. Nobody helped her. Is that about social loafing? No. What is that about? That's the bystander effect, right? Diffusion of responsibility. Well, talking about homework, teamwork within the small groups, researchers noticed that one of the high individual groups seemed to get along particularly well. All four members of that group scored highest on individualism in the follow-up questionnaire. Is that social loafing? No. What is that? Oh, sorry. I just did a goofy. I meant to eliminate that. Yeah, no. What does that demonstrate? Yeah, polarization. Okay, when allowed to give feedback through an anonymous online system, several of the participants wrote nasty comments they did not express in person. Is that social loafing? No, what is that? Yeah, that's de-individuation. Very good. Excuse me. All right, next one and last one. So, what kind of question is this? Do we need the passage to answer this question? Oh, yeah, we do. This is an implicit question. It's asking us to make sense out of stuff. And what's our strategy? Yeah, Roman numeral. And since it's our last question, we're just going to go ahead and do it. Okay, so remember Roman numeral asks us to take a look at which of the Roman numerals are used exactly twice. So we're going to evaluate which Roman numeral first. Yeah, Roman numeral 1. Okay, was priming part of this study. Yeah, yippers. So we can eliminate A, we can eliminate C. Let's evaluate Roman numeral 3 next. Was group polarization part of this study? Yippers. So our answer, ladies and gents, is D. All right, any questions about anything having to do with this ICC passage? I see somebody typing. Yes, there are more imaging techniques. There's fMRI. Now, if one of those options had been fMRI, could that have given precise information about changes in the area of the brain? Yeah. Okay, going back to number 4. Okay, here's the deal. 2 of these options give you structural information. CAT scans and regular MRI gives you information just about the structure of the brain. It doesn't tell you anything about function, what's going on, what the activity level is, changes in activity level. PET scans and EEGs are both functional. They will tell you about changing activity. However, the question asks about precise regions of changing activity. And of the 2, PET scans and EEG, the only one that can do that is the PET scan. Does that help, Lauren? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Let's talk about attribution. Okay, attribution theory. We're always trying to figure out why people do what they do, and we come up with our own answers about that. So for the question of, why did that guy just cut me off in traffic? Well, you might answer, well, because obviously they're a jerk. Now, why did I just cut somebody off in traffic? Well, because I got to be someplace. I'm late. I'm running late. I need to go. Okay. These are two different ways we attribute behavior. One way is a dispositional attribution. We attribute it to internal causes, but something about the person. The other are situational attributions, external causes, something about the situation. So which is which? Which one of these two examples is the dispositional attribution? Yeah, the one that says they're a jerk. The one that says, because I got someplace to be, that's about situational. Dispositional is person did it because they're jerky. All right. So along with these different ways we attribute, attribution also leads to certain biases. So here's the deal. You're in a doctor's waiting room, you've noticed that somebody's been waiting 20 minutes to see the doctor, and then now they're getting angry with the receptionist because they've had to wait. And you think, wow, that person is such a huge jerk. Okay, you have just committed the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error says we over-attribute people's behavior to their personality. Rather than looking at the situation. All right. Now, you are the one that's been waiting 20 minutes and you get angry with the receptionist and you think, I've got a good reason to be angry. You have just committed the actor-observer bias. Right? When we tend to attribute our own actions to the situation rather than internally, that is the actor-observer bias. Okay, these two things try to help us figure out, give us context, understanding, a way to categorize. Why is it people are behaving badly? All right. So you get an awesome score, and of course you will, on the psych portion of the MCAT. and you think, I worked so hard for that, I totally deserve it. Or you get a really bad score on the physical science portion, and you say, well, of course I did, because my physics teacher didn't teach me a dadgum thing. Okay, you have just committed the self-serving bias. When we attribute our successes to ourselves, but our failures to others, that's the self-serving bias. Okay, this one helps us attribute, whose fault is it? Who's responsible for the outcome? Okay, you need to sign up for health insurance, but you keep putting it off because you're young and healthy, and nothing bad's going to happen to you. And you say, there's hardly any risk here. It's not going to happen to me. Okay, that is the optimism bias. When we think bad things happen to other people, but not us, that's the optimism bias. All right, somebody else is in a bad car wreck, but they don't have health insurance, and they have to file medical bankruptcy. And you think, well, dummy, your fault. Should have had the dadgum insurance. Okay, that is the just world belief. Bad things happen to others because of their own actions. And this set of attributions helps us figure out to whom do bad things happen. All righty. You get to check out your understanding right now with this freestanding question. Alrighty. Closing the poll, publishing results. Most folks are in agreement that the answer is C. And indeed it is. Yeah, this is absolutely self-serving bias, right? When things are going great, it's because I'm great. When things mess up, it's somebody else or something else's fault. Couldn't be because I messed up. Okay, we have something called the ultimate attribution error. This is a play on the fundamental attribution error. And this has to do with groups and group behavior. It's like the fundamental attribution error applied to groups of people. So what's the difference between an in-group and an out-group? Yeah, in-group is your group. They're your peoples, your peeps. And anybody who's not your peeps, that's part of the out-group. Okay, so when an in-group member does a good thing, it gets attributed to something about them, their quality, their personality, their character. It's an internal attribution. And then if they do a bad thing, well, it's the exception to the rule. It's something about the environment, because they're my peeps. They're good folks. They wouldn't necessarily do that. So, cut them a break. All right. This gets flipped with out-group members. Right? So if an out-group member does a good thing, well, that's a fluke. That there's something about the environment, there's something about the situation. They just happen to do a good thing because goodness knows they are not good people. And then, of course, if they do a bad thing, well, of course they did. That's right in line with the kind of things that they do. Okay. This way of thinking, the ultimate attribution error, plays heavily into stereotypical thinking, racism, all kinds of things. Okay, it's all about prejudice and discrimination. Okay, now we got a name for what we call it when people believe that their group is superior over another. We talked about that previous class. What do we call that? Yeah, ethnocentrism. Right? So this ultimate attribution error is also way tied up in ethnocentric thought. All right, self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, this is when our beliefs about somebody makes their their bad behavior actually happen. Okay, it's when we unknowingly, unintentionally cause something to happen just because we expect it to happen. And then the other person unknowingly, unwittingly confirms that stereotype about themselves. Okay. The important thing is there is a false definition at work which evokes a behavior that makes the original false idea come true. So self-fulfilling prophecy then perpetuates the error in thinking or the false definition. So here's an example. Women perform worse on a math test than did men. However, if before the test women were led to believe women typically perform as well as men on the test, guess what? They do. And by the way, why do women typically perform worse on math tests? according to this line of thinking. Absolutely gender bias. Stereotypic thinking. Men are better at math than women. Okay. And sometimes women do score worse because of something called stereotype threat. Okay, when folks are anxious, fearful of confirming negative stereotypes, then they actually do. It's called stereotype threat. So there's negative stereotype threat. That's the thing about women and being bad at math. But there's also something called stereotype boost or positive stereotype, when people actually perform better than they otherwise would, because that's expected too. So can you think of an example of a positive stereotype? Yeah, Asians being good at math. Or men are good at math, right? Men are better at math. Asians are better at math, okay? We all know a bunch of negative stereotypes. That's easy to come up with. All right, so for the rest of our time together today, we get to feed multiple birds off the same crust of bread, so to speak. What we're going to be doing is a combination of reviewing things about methods, research methods, as we look and review major important studies from social psychology that give us some really important theory and concepts. So for each of these studies, we're going to be looking at, what are the independent, dependent variables? What is the study design? Are there experimental and control groups? And that kind of thing. So we're going to start. If we can get, oh, good grief. Okay, let's see if we can do it this way then. There we go. Very famous study, Solomon Asch's conformity experiments. Okay, so we've got a bunch of people participating. They were first asked independently by themselves to determine which line is most similar to a comparison line. So they're shown the line in Exhibit 1, shown Exhibit 2, asked which line, A, B, or C, is most like the line in Exhibit 1. And when they did this by themselves, they were correct over 99% of the time. Okay, then they were placed in a room with a bunch of other people who all were part of the experiment. They knew what the deal was. They were not the subject. They were part of their research team. They were the Confederates, in on the joke. And on the first few tests, all the Confederates responded correctly, but then they started choosing wrong things. And 33% of the subjects ended up conforming to the group by answering incorrectly. Big stuff about conformity. So, is this a true experiment? Because what do you have to have a true experiment? Okay, it's quantitative. Is there a control? There is something that's used as a control in this study. The first task, right? The control is the independent answers. When people came in and they were shown this by themselves. So then what's the experimental group? Yeah, the Confederate group, when then the subject went into the Confederate group, that's the experimental group. So what's the independent variable? Because you also have to have an independent variable and a dependent variable in a real experiment. Yeah, the independent variable is the influence of the other people, how they answered. And so the dependent variable would be what? Yeah, the choice they made, the subject's response. That was what was being measured. Okay. So, point of the study would be that we will conform under certain conditions, we will conform to other people's behavior. Okay, another one. Milgram's obedience experiments. Okay, so the person that's sitting here in the role of teacher, that is the subject. The teacher believes that the learner is also a subject, but the learner is not. The learner is actually a Confederate. Okay, so that's how the subject thinks that this is random assignment, but it's not. Okay, the experimenter then orders the teacher to give electric shocks to the learner who's actually in on it, and actually no real electric shocks are being given, but the teacher doesn't know that. So every time the learner gives a wrong answer, the teacher believes that they are giving this other person a shock. What they are really listening to is a pre-recorded session. So it's the same session over and over and over again. But again, the teacher doesn't know that. And what Milgram found was that 65% of the subjects kept going and administering these shocks all the way up to 450 volts. They could have conceivably killed somebody simply because a man in a white lab coat, they should have put a white lab coat on this dude, continued to say, if the teacher objected, just continued to say, it's really important for the experiment for you to please go ahead and continue. 65% of the people did that. So, do we have a control and an experimental group? Do we have anything that's controlled here? Well, there is something that is controlled. The learner's responses are always the same because it's a recording. The thing that changes is who's the teacher. What is the independent variable? Yeah. And what is being measured? What's the dependent variable? Right, the teacher's level of obedience. Okay. Now, by the way, this is considered one of the most unethical experiments in the history of psychology. However, really important information was gained about the influence of other people, authority, and obedience as a result of this study. Milgram did this study because he was very troubled about what had happened in Nazi Germany and, how did these horrible, horrible things occur? Surely these people, were some kind of sociopaths. And he found, nope, 65% of the people that thought they were in the presence of an authority figure did what the authority figure told them to do, even though it was potentially harmful to another human being. Okay. This one, I think I want to just go through so we can get to the next piece. The Harlow monkey studies. They were interested in understanding more about the role of tactile comfort in managing stress and anxiety in baby monkeys. So they had taken baby monkeys from their moms and put them in two different surrogate mom cages. Some babies were in one with a bottle. The surrogate mama was just out of bare wire in a bottle, and the other had cloth covering it, but no bottle. And at the time, what the hypothesis was that the babies that had would go to the bare wire mama with the bottle, and would form attachment with that mom. And they found that that wasn't the truth. The baby monkeys strongly preferred those cloth mamas, only went to the bottle mamas when they were hungry. Of course, both sets of monkeys were totally messed up. They had no idea what monkey behavior was. But, okay. So this was kind of leading into interest on attachment and attachment theory in human beings. So we've got very famous study conducted by Mary Ainsworth, known as the strain situation experiment, where moms would leave their babies in a playroom with an unfamiliar person, and they looked at baby's behavior when mom left and when she came back. So findings indicated that there are two kinds of attachment styles. Securely attached kiddos explore while mom's there, cry when she leaves, but are quickly consoled when she comes back. And they found that all these securely attached kids had very sensitive, responsive caregivers. On the other hand, insecurely attached kids had other behaviors other than what was just described. And their caregivers were not nearly as sensitive or consistent. So insecurely attached kids demonstrate either ambivalent attachment Okay, so how this rolls is when mom leaves, baby cries loudly, but then remain upset when she returns. And it looks like the name comes from their what looks like ambivalence on their part. They may be both clingy and seem happy, but also kind of angry and upset. Then we have something called avoidant attachment, where these kiddos are indifferent to mom leaving and to her return. It looks like they're cool as a cucumber, but they're not. Physiologically, they are highly activated. And then we've got something called disorganized attachment, which is any combination of any or all of the above. And it comes from the fact that kids with this attachment style really cannot predict what mom is going to do at all. So we got a freestanding question here to kind of check out your understanding of that. Please go ahead and use the poll. Okay, I am going to go ahead and close this out and post results. And we have what kind of strategy going on here? Yeah, Roman numeral. So let's take a look at that. All right. So actually we can start anywhere because all of these are used only twice. So, okay, mom leaves, toddler's upset, cries, and runs to the door. So is that something you would expect in securely attached kids? Yeah. So we can rule out A and B. Is that something you would expect in ambivalently attached kids? Yes. But not in avoidant, right? So our answer then is C. Okay, we've got some other issues here. Some of these I am going to suggest as homework, this being one of them. Come back and take a look at this slide for homework. As well as this one, which is talking about the difference between formal and informal norms. Basically, formal norms are laws, informal, or things you just pick up from the society and culture. Knowing the difference between folkways, mores, and taboos. Basically, this is getting increasingly stricter in enforcement and moving towards a sense of morality rather than just what people do. So come back and take a look at that. Understanding norms are just basically expectations about behavior. So that deviance is what we call people what it is when people don't comply with the norms, when they violate those expectations. And that there are different forms of sanction when we do that. Right? Legal is what happens with formal deviance. Stigmatization is what happens with informal deviance. And then we can simply have preference for one behavior over another. Right, this is what I really want us to take a look at in the time we have left. This is about persuasion. Okay, persuasion is what we do when we're trying to get someone to comply, but we don't really have power or authority over them. We try to persuade them. It's how we influence what people do, say, etc. And there's three key things about persuasion. One has to do with the message itself, what we are telling people. The other has to do with the messenger who is delivering the message, or other superficial characteristics associated with message delivery. And then lastly, what of primary importance is the target, is the audience. It has to do with what's going on with who's being addressed and how open, available, and capable they are of assessing the message. We have this thing called the elaboration likelihood model that says there's two ways persuasion works. The central route, where people are about the argument, it's about the message. The peripheral route is the focus on the messenger. And it looks kind of like this. So here we go. We've got the message. We've got somebody delivering the message. Depending on the audience. All right. If the audience is highly motivated, able to think about the message, process it, critically analyze it, then we use the central route. We keep the emphasis on the message. This is what's going to lead to long-term behavioral change. Right? This will lead to lasting change. If the audience either is not motivated or doesn't have the ability to critically think, analyze, then we got to go to the peripheral route, right? And the peripheral route, the best you can get there is temporary change. So let's take a look at this and apply it in this freestanding question. Okay, I'm going to close out the poll and publish the results. And we're going to take a look here. There is a phrase in the question stem that points us in the direction of what really is the best answer here. What is that key phrase? Yep, unwilling audience. So if you have an unwilling or unable audience, what do? Central route or peripheral route? Peripheral. And peripheral concentrates what? On the message or on other things, how the message is delivered, who delivers it? Right, other things. So would you then be able to do a careful step-by-step explanation of the changes? Would that work with this audience? No. Would acknowledging difficulties of the change, would that get you the best reception of the lecture? No. Would an accompanying manual for them to read on their own time? Would that get you a good reception? Yeah, not only no, but pardon me, hell no, right? Would an attractive presenter, comfortable conference room, refreshments, yeah, all that additional, all the goodies, right? You have any questions about that? Okay. All right. All of this additional, I am assigning you as homework. Other methods of persuasion. All right, aggression. Let's talk about aggression. Right, it's behavior meant to hurt or intimidate others. We've got different types of aggression. Hostile aggression is impulsive, unplanned, uncontrollable. It's about strong emotion, and the intent is to hurt the other person. Instrumental aggression is goal-oriented aggression. It's planned. It's controlled. It's the goal is to get something. And if people get hurt in the process, so be it. It's the intent is not to physically harm somebody. That's hostile aggression. The main intent of instrumental aggression is to get something. Okay. Now, when we talk about aggression, we're looking at influences from the environment, from the culture, and biology. Because we are finding that all three of these things come together into an area where we can kind of predict how aggressive somebody is going to be, right? Whether people are male or female, testosterone makes people aggressive. Now, in some cultures and in some environments, that will either be enhanced, applauded, and rewarded, or it will be downplayed and punished. So how the society and culture and the environment either backs that up or shuts it down will determine then for men just how aggressive they might be. Women are also aggressive, but in a different way. Women tend to be relationally aggressive. I am going to assign these things on attraction also as homework. There are 3 things that foster attraction. We are going to skip over passage 4. I want you to see our cheat sheet for this class. Everything under most important terms, you should have a flashcard for. Absolutely. I would further suggest make sure you understand what the dramaturgical perspective is, something about learned helplessness, diffusion of responsibility, absolutely about attachment and attachment theory, the fundamental attribution error, self-serving bias, ultimate attribution error, things about stereotypes, absolutely central and peripheral root of persuasion, the difference between hostile and instrumental aggression, all of those tend to be areas we've seen freestanding questions about that stuff. When we're in class, if there's freestanding questions, good chance that you're going to find something like that on the MCAT. So zone in on that, pay attention to those things, make sure you're good to go on those. Any questions that you have about anything we've talked about today? I will be glad to stay and answer questions. If you have none, you are free to leave. Yeah, let's do that again. It's looking like people are typing, but I'm not seeing anything coming up. I have not seen anything that Aaron had a question about. Oh, have they asked for famous experimenters' names in FSQs? In famous theorists, we've already seen some, like Durkheim, Marx, and Weber with sociology. They'll typically ask more about major theorists than they do experimenters. Thanks, Ben, for the heads up, because that just scrolled right by me. Y'all have a good weekend. Lauren, are you still here? And have a question?